Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of Buckeye Mysteries. Today I'll be talking about Helltown, Ohio, also known as the abandoned town of Boston in Summit County. Now this is not to be confused with Boston Township or Boston Heights. So there was a Travel Channel show about Helltown that aired a few years ago, and that's a can of worms in of itself, because they claimed like a bunch of BS about Boston, and they also talked about how there was the legend of like the Wendigo there, even though they used a modern depiction of a Wendigo and not the true depiction of a Wendigo. Personally, I am from the Cleveland area, so my godfather lives up near where Helltown is. And when I was younger, I would play in the forest of Cuyahoga Valley National Park because I was pretty much in his backyard. And I honestly never learned about Helltown until a few years ago. So the reason why it's called Helltown is because honestly it's just a ghost town and there's some mysteries to it. It was supposed to be a part of Cuyahoga Valley National Park, but that fell through. So the history of Helltown starts in 1806 and was founded by Alfred Wilcott and James Stanford. It wasn't officially recognized as a town until January 15th of 1811, and this was when it was recognized by the Connecticut Western Reserve. Since many people who moved to the area were from New England, James Stanford decided to call it Boston. The Erie Canal was built up in Boston in 1825 to 1827, and then the town boomed. There was a bunch of industry, and they would transfer goods between Akron and Cleveland around the Boston area. And then until 1880, a railway was built, and that led to the decline of the canals. Due to the flood of 1913, it was a huge blow to the canal and the quarry in Boston, and they ended up closing the quarry in 1920 due to concrete being a much better material for building. The abandonment started in 1970, where 80% of Boston would be converted into lands for the Cuyahoga Valley National Park to thaw any disappearing forests in the area. Now, I found an article out of New York saying that $1.8 million was funneled into the city in 1977 to make the city stay afloat. So I don't think the city specifically shut down exactly in 1947, but it was starting to get there, as there were definitely some residents still there in 1977. The reason why the town closed down and became abandoned eventually was because President Gerald Ford gave power to the National Park Service to take land, and therefore the National Park Service started kicking people out. One of the residents of Boston said, "Now I know how the Indians felt." The biggest problem with this move was the National Park Service neglected the land after kicking out most of the people, if not all the people. And then now the entire town's been mostly demolished by 2016. Now, there are a bunch of mysteries involving Boston, or what they now call Helltown. One of the mysteries I found was the Crybaby Bridge, which is on Boston Mills Road. And it is said that when people were to park their car, you could hear the cries of a baby that fell in the river or the creek, and some say it was an accident, some say it was more nefarious, even though there aren't any historical records of this happening. They also say if you were to leave your car, you would find footprints and handprints from children on your car, even though this is kind of a BS thing, because anyone that is into the paranormal would know anytime dust goes on your car, there would always be handprints on your car, and it's just because at some point your car got touched either by you, a passenger, or anyone else, and the dust is just collecting where the fingerprints would be. Now, there's also talk of a rusted school bus in Boston where a bunch of high school students were going on a skiing trip. And since I'm from the area, I know there is a skiing, not a resort, but like a place where people go skiing. And there's tubing not too far from there either. So I'm pretty sure it's the same spot I'm thinking of. Like Polar Blast is what it's called, or what it was called in the last like 10 years or 15 years when I was there last. So the story is a school bus was flagged by an elderly lady on the side of the road talking about some injured boy at her house. The bus did turn into the house and drove through the woods, and then they realized there was a trap, and everyone on the bus was sacrificed. And there's stories that you could still see the ghost of the children and even the serial killer itself on the bus. Even though this is just, I don't know, outlandish, I don't think there's any truth to the story whatsoever. Some people say you could hear the screams of the children on the bus and a lit cigarette of the serial killer, but I really haven't found much on this either. There's also talks of satanic cults going on in Helltown or Boston, which is probably another reason why it got its name. I really couldn't find much on this either, other than there's a Presbyterian church with upside down crosses on it, even though it's just the Gothic style of the church, so there's really not much to it. I honestly did not find much on the cults. I'm guessing this is where like some of the stories of like sacrifices came in, but I don't know. I'm just guessing a lot of the cult activity and stuff like that just came from the people not understanding the Gothic revival style.
My anaconda don't want no.
Part of this topic is the Peninsula Python, which is said to be an 18 to 30 foot long python, and this in metric is 5.5 meters to 9.1 meters. Depending on the species, the average python is 19 to 23 feet long, which is about 6 to 7 meters. And the largest recorded python, even though unconfirmed, was 32.8 feet long, which is 9.997 meters. Now, the largest of Burmese pythons are 19 feet, or about 5.8 meters, but I really couldn't find very good information on this. So to be honest, I didn't really look that hard. But it is in the range of the python people claim to see in the Boston area. The Peninsula Python was first spotted in the 1940s by a Clarence Mitchell in 1944. He claimed he saw a 18-foot-long snake in his cornfield on June 8th of 1944. Now, following that sighting, a posse was formed on June 25th, but they found no evidence. Again, on August 1st, there was even more sightings, and one of the people who witnessed the snake was Pauline Hopko, where she said her cows were spooked by the snake and they broke through the fence. I also found another article that there is a sighting of the Peninsula Python in Ashtabula, Ohio, which is honestly quite the ways away from Boston Township, or Boston. There were many circuses in Ohio in 1944, not too far from the Boston area. So perhaps a snake escaped from the circus or whatnot. There was a claim that there was a crashed carnival truck in 1934, but I don't really find this one very compelling just because Ohio's climate in the winter is very cold, especially up north where I used to live. It does get quite a bit of snow compared to where I live now in southern Ohio, but I just don't foresee a snake living about 10 years in the climate that Ohio has. Now, we do have snakes here, but they're a lot smaller, so I don't really see like a python living that long up here, though. But who knows? I mean, I didn't study herpetology at all, so. Now, the real story of the peninsula python really comes from 1945, or supposed real story comes from 1945 from a Cleveland Press reporter and known hoaxer Bob Bordner. He wrote an article for The Atlantic called Peninsula Python, an Absolutely True Story, which is, anyone would realize anytime someone says they're telling the truth, they're not. Now, this claims that the snake was mutated due to a toxic spill, but as I said earlier, I mean, 18 to 30 feet, yeah, it's a big snake, but it's not, like, too far-fetched. I mean, I don't really foresee a snake living that long in Ohio to begin with, but whatever. Now, the toxic spill that is mentioned quite a bit is said to be the reason why the government really shut down the city, but really there's a dump that was found in 1985 that caused illnesses and rashes on rangers, while some sources say it was a hiker. But there were hundreds of barrels leaking toxic material found in the area. Boston also has an end-of-the-world moniker, and on some parts off of Stanford Road. It's mostly due to the cliffs and the drop-offs, where it's called that, and people say it's evil, and it's thought that spirits would take control of your car and cause it to crash. There's also stories of, in the cemetery, that there's orbs seen, and, I mean, obviously, most of the time when orbs are taken, or pictures of orbs are taken, it's either from, like, a bug near the camera or dust, but that's neither here nor there. The slaughterhouse and morgue also get some attention. In fact, it's pretty creepy. The movie The Children of the Corn was shot there, supposedly. I didn't verify it, to be honest. But honestly, in conclusion, Helltown is probably just folkloric in nature. Just sheer incompetence of the government is really to blame about the story of Helltown. And a lot of this just seems to be like rationalizations of people who didn't really have like a good foresight in the future, and a lot of worry going on, a lot of stress. So honestly, nothing is probably real involving Helltown. It's just honestly just more proof the government is incompetent and useless most of the time. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video on Helltown. Sorry it's a little disappointing. I didn't really find much interesting things on there. A lot of it was just like, trust me bro, but the only thing I found most interesting was the Peninsula Python. Probably my next video on Buckeye Mysteries will be something I find more believable, and probably do something like a cryptid, and I haven't decided yet, but I have an idea what I want to do, but we'll see in the future. And the thing is, if I do it on the cryptid, there's a lot of Bigfoot creatures in Ohio, or stories. I would probably do like specific creatures spotted, so like the Minerva monster and orange eyes. Like I would do a separate video on both of them, because I believe they're separate creatures. But yep, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and in the meantime, I actually don't know what to say. Well, thank you, bye.